Every spring, the average American gardener drives to a home improvement store and loads $50 to $80 worth of fertilizer bags into the back of their car. Granules, liquids, slow-release pellets, specialty blends. They spread it on their garden beds, their vegetable plots, their lawn. They do this every single year. Some of them have been doing it for 20 or 30 years straight. Here is the part that should stop you in your tracks. The dirt underneath their feet already contains every mineral their plants need. It has always been there. But the minerals are locked inside the soil particles, unavailable to roots, just sitting there doing nothing. And a pinch of the right kind of salt, dissolved in water, is the key that unlocks all of it, for free, permanently. But the fertilizer industry, which pulls in over $200 billion a year globally, has made absolutely sure you never figure that out. In the next 18 minutes, you are going to learn 3 things. First, the exact science behind why dirt and salt create a fertilizer that outperforms anything in a bag. Second, the step-by-step process to make it, apply it, and watch your soil come alive in ways you have never seen before. And third, the story of who discovered this in 1939, what happened to their research, and why an entire industry spent decades making sure it stayed forgotten. Stay until the end, because there are 4 mistakes that will destroy your plants instead of feeding them. And the difference between a thriving garden and a dead one is a single measurement. You walk into your garden in late May. The tomatoes you planted 3 weeks ago look pale. The leaves are yellowing at the edges. The peppers are barely growing. You did everything right. Good soil from the garden center. Fertilizer applied exactly like the bag said. Watered on schedule, but something is off and you cannot figure out what. So you go back to the store, you buy a different fertilizer, maybe something with more nitrogen this time, or maybe a liquid feed because the granules did not seem to work. You spend another $25, bring it home, apply it. Things look a little better for a few weeks. Then the yellowing comes back. Therefore, you start wondering if your soil is bad. You buy a soil test kit for $15. The results say your pH is fine, but your phosphorus is low. Therefore, you buy a phosphorus-specific supplement. Another $18. You work it into the beds and wait. But by August, the tomatoes are still underperforming. The peppers finally produced, but they are small, thin-walled, and tasteless compared to what you get at the farmer's market. You spent over $120 on fertilizer products this season alone, and the garden is mediocre at best. That is not bad luck. That is not bad soil. That is the result of using products specifically designed to feed your plants just enough to keep them alive, but never enough to make your soil healthy on its own. Because healthy, self-sustaining soil does not need fertilizer, and a customer who does not need your product is a customer you have lost forever. They made you believe that soil is just a medium, just a place to put roots. That the real nutrition comes from the bag, that without their synthetic nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium blend, your garden will fail. And every year, you spend $50, $80, $100 reinforcing that belief. And the worst part, the minerals your plants are starving for are already in the ground, locked inside the clay and silt particles, chemically bonded to the soil structure, completely inaccessible to roots. All they need is one thing to set them free, and that one thing costs nothing. Hold on, because what happened next changes everything. In 1939, during the tail end of the Dust Bowl, a group of soil researchers working with the Department of Agriculture in western Kansas were trying to figure out something that did not make sense. The topsoil across the Great Plains had blown away. Millions of acres of farmland were dead. But scattered across the same region, small pockets of land near ancient salt flats and mineral springs were still producing crops. Not great crops, but crops. Green, growing plants in the middle of a wasteland. They collected soil samples from those pockets and compared them to the barren fields just a few miles away. The mineral content was nearly identical. Same iron, same calcium, same phosphorus locked in the clay. The only measurable difference was the sodium content. The fertile pockets had slightly elevated levels of sodium and trace minerals, consistent with natural salt deposits that had been leaching into the soil for centuries. What they found was a process that soil scientists now call cation exchange. Here is how it works in plain language. Clay particles in soil carry a negative electrical charge. Nutrient minerals like potassium, calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus bond to that negative charge and get locked in place. Plant roots cannot pull them free, they are chemically stuck. But sodium ions from salt carry a strong positive charge. When dissolved sodium contacts those clay particles, it displaces the locked minerals. It bumps them off the clay surface and releases them into the soil water, where roots can immediately absorb them. The salt does not feed the plant. The salt unlocks what the soil has been hoarding. And this is where the story takes a turn nobody expected. By 1939, the petrochemical industry had a problem. They had spent the previous 2 decades building massive ammonium nitrate production facilities, originally for explosives during World War I, and they needed a peacetime market for all that excess capacity. Synthetic fertilizer was the answer. Sell farmers a product they had to buy every single year, made from chemicals produced in factories the industry already owned. A natural, free method that used salt and dirt to restore soil fertility was the worst possible news. If word spread that depleted farmland could recover using mineral salt that cost virtually nothing, the entire fertilizer model would collapse before it even reached scale. The research was not banned. It was not classified. It was simply never funded again. The papers sat in agricultural archives, uncited, unreferenced. The scientists moved on to other projects. And within a decade, synthetic NPK fertilizer became the standard across American agriculture, taught in every extension program, sold in every feed store, and accepted as the only way to grow productive crops. 85 years later, the average home gardener is still buying bags of the same basic chemistry, and the dirt under their feet is still full of locked minerals, waiting for a key that costs nothing to turn. That makes me angry, not frustrated. Angry. Because this is not complicated science locked away in some research lab. This is a teaspoon of salt in a gallon of water. Your grandmother could have done this if anyone had told her. Nobody told her, and that was on purpose. So let me show you exactly how to do this, step by step, so you never hand another dollar to a fertilizer company for something your own soil already has. The first thing you need to understand is which salt. This is critical. Ordinary table salt is refined sodium chloride with anti-caking agents and sometimes iodine added. It has been stripped of every trace mineral during processing. If you use table salt on your garden, you are dumping pure sodium chloride onto your soil, and sodium chloride in concentration is a plant killer. This is how the Romans salted Carthage. Do not use table salt, ever. What you want is unrefined sea salt or mined mineral salt, the kind that still looks a little gray or pink or brownish instead of pure white. Unrefined sea salt contains over 80 trace minerals in addition to sodium chloride, including magnesium, potassium, zinc, iron, manganese, boron, and dozens of others in micro quantities. These trace minerals are critical because they become part of the soil ecosystem and feed the microbial life that makes the whole process work long-term. A 2-pound bag of unrefined sea salt costs between $3 and $4 at most grocery stores. That single bag will treat a garden for an entire season. Multiple seasons, actually. Step 1. Dissolve 1 teaspoon, and I mean 1 level teaspoon, not a heaping tablespoon, of unrefined sea salt in 1 gallon of water. Stir it until fully dissolved. This ratio matters more than anything else in this entire video. 1 teaspoon per gallon creates a concentration of roughly 200 parts per million sodium in the solution. That is enough to trigger cation exchange in clay and silt particles without approaching the threshold where sodium begins to damage plant cells. If you double it, you are in the danger zone. If you triple it, you are killing your garden. 1 teaspoon, 1 gallon, measure it. Now let me ask you something. How many years have you been buying fertilizer that costs $10, $15, $20 a bag, spreading it on soil that already contains the nutrients your plants need, and wondering why your garden never quite performs the way the bag promises? That frustration is not your fault. You were never given the information to do it differently. Until now. Step 2. Water your garden beds first. The soil needs to be moist before you apply the salt solution. This is not optional. If you pour the salt water onto dry soil, the sodium concentration at the surface spikes before it has a chance to distribute evenly through the soil profile. You will burn root tips and the surface microbiome. Water first with plain water, wait 30 minutes, then apply the salt solution. Step 3. Apply the salt solution directly to the soil, not on the leaves. Pour it slowly and evenly around the base of each plant or across the garden bed using a watering can. 1 gallon of solution covers approximately 50 square feet of garden space. For a standard raised bed that is 4 feet by 8 feet, you need roughly 1 gallon. For a larger in-ground garden, scale up proportionally. Always 1 teaspoon of salt per gallon of water, no matter how much you are making. And I mean evenly. Do not dump the whole gallon in one spot and assume it will spread on its own. It will not. Water follows gravity, not your wishes. If you pour it all in one corner of a raised bed, that corner gets a sodium spike while the rest of the bed gets nothing. The plants in the saturated zone show salt stress within days, wilting leaves and browning edges, while the plants 3 feet away get zero benefit. I did this exact thing my first time, poured too fast along one row, and had 3 tomato plants looking sick for 2 weeks while the others were fine. Slow, even passes with the watering can. Think of it like painting a wall. Overlap your passes, cover everything once, but we are not done, not even close. Because what happens in the soil over the next 48 hours is where the real magic is. And understanding it is the difference between someone who tries this once and gives up and someone who never buys fertilizer again. After you apply the solution, the dissolved sodium ions begin migrating through the soil water. When they contact clay particles, they displace the bonded nutrient minerals. Potassium comes free. Calcium comes free. Magnesium, phosphorus, iron, all of them start releasing into the soil solution where roots can access them. But here is what happens at the same time. The trace minerals from the unrefined salt, the 80+ elements that were in that gray unprocessed crystal, start feeding the soil bacteria and fungi. These microorganisms are the real engine of soil fertility. They break down organic matter, they convert nitrogen from the air into forms plants can use, and they create a living network that delivers nutrients directly to root systems. Commercial fertilizer does none of this. It feeds the plant and starves the microbiome. Over 3 to 5 years of synthetic fertilizer use, the microbial population in your soil crashes, and the soil becomes dependent on the bag. That is not a side effect. That is the mechanism that guarantees repeat purchases. If you are finding this useful, hit subscribe. I have been making videos about the things they do not want you knowing for free, and this fertilizer secret is one of the biggest ones I have ever covered. Now let me show you the proof. Step 4. Repeat the application once per month during the growing season, not weekly, monthly. The cation exchange process is not instant. It takes time for the displaced minerals to distribute through the root zone and for the microbial population to respond to the trace mineral input. Over-applying creates sodium accumulation, which is the exact thing we are trying to avoid. 1 application per month, 1 teaspoon per gallon for 4 to 5 months of growing season. That is 4 to 5 teaspoons of salt total per 50 square feet per year. I've been doing this on my own vegetable beds for 3 years now. The first season, the difference was subtle. The tomato plants were a little darker green, the peppers set fruit a week earlier than usual, but nothing dramatic. I almost quit. The second season is when everything changed. The soil texture was visibly different. Darker, looser, more earthworms per shovel of dirt than I had ever seen. My Roma tomatoes produced over 40 pounds from 4 plants. The bell peppers were thick-walled, heavy, and tasted better than anything at the grocery store. My neighbor Carl walked over, looked at my beds, and asked what fertilizer I was using. I told him salt water. He thought I was messing with him. Third season, this past year, Carl started doing it too. His yard had the worst clay soil in the neighborhood, hard as concrete by July, cracking in the heat. He followed the exact process. 1 teaspoon per gallon, once a month, moist soil first. By August, he was pulling carrots out of ground that he could not even push a shovel into 2 years earlier. He told me he had been spending over $130 per year on fertilizer and soil amendments for the last 12 years. 12 years. That is over $1,500 on products that never fixed his clay problem. The saltwater fixed it in 1 season for less than $4. Now, before you go and try this, you need to hear what I'm about to tell you. Because one wrong measurement ruins the whole thing, and I have seen it happen. Mistake number 1. Using table salt or any refined salt. I said this earlier, but it is worth repeating because this single mistake has destroyed more gardens than any drought. Table salt is pure sodium chloride with 0 trace minerals. It does not trigger healthy cation exchange. It just floods the soil with sodium, which displaces nutrients but provides nothing to replace them. Your soil becomes saline, water repellent, and toxic to roots. Unrefined sea salt or mined mineral salt only. If it is bright white and pours easily, it is the wrong salt. Mistake number 2, exceeding the dose. 1 teaspoon per gallon, not 2. Not a little extra because my soil is really bad. Sodium toxicity in soil is cumulative. If you overapply even once, the excess sodium bonds to clay particles and becomes very difficult to flush out. You would need heavy, repeated watering over weeks to leach it below the root zone. I watched a guy on a gardening forum dump a 1/4 cup of sea salt into a gallon of water and pour it on his tomato bed. Every plant was dead within a week. He posted about it saying the method does not work. The method works. His measurement was off by a factor of 12. Have you ever noticed that the instructions on fertilizer bags are deliberately vague? Apply liberally, spread evenly, use as needed. There is a reason for that. Vague instructions mean inconsistent results, which means you blame yourself instead of the product, which means you buy a different product next season. The salt method has one exact number, 1 teaspoon per gallon. That precision is your protection. Mistake number 3, applying to dry soil. The sodium needs water already present in the soil to distribute evenly and begin the cation exchange process. If you pour salt water onto bone-dry garden beds, the solution sits on the surface. The water evaporates in the sun, and you are left with a salt crust on top of your soil. That crust blocks water penetration and creates a sodium-concentrated layer right where your seedling roots are trying to grow. Water first, wait 30 minutes, then apply, every time. And mistake number 4, and this is the one that matters more than all the others combined. Continuing to use synthetic fertilizer alongside the salt method. Here is why. Synthetic NPK fertilizer delivers nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in forms that are immediately available to plant roots. That sounds good, but it short-circuits the natural nutrient cycle. When plants get instant synthetic nutrients, they stop developing the deep root systems and mycorrhizal fungal partnerships that allow them to access soil minerals on their own. The microbiome that the salt method is trying to rebuild gets overwhelmed and outcompeted by the chemical inputs. You end up with plants that look fine on the surface but are completely dependent on the bag. You have to choose. Either you feed the soil and let it feed the plants, or you feed the plants directly and let the soil die. You cannot do both. And every fertilizer company in the world is counting on you choosing their bag over your own dirt. So let me put this in real numbers. The average home gardener spends between $80 and $150 per year on fertilizer, soil amendments, and specialty plant food products. Over 10 years, that is $800 to $1,500. For a quarter-acre garden, it is often more. The salt method costs under $4 per year in materials. Under $4. Over 10 years, that is $40 total versus up to $1,500. That is over $1,400 staying in your pocket over a decade. That is a new set of raised beds. That is a greenhouse kit. That is a chest freezer to store the extra food your garden is now producing because the soil is actually alive and doing its job. Now you know how dirt and salt create the only fertilizer your garden will ever need. No bags, no chemicals, no annual spending cycle. Next week, I am going to show you a 70-cent paste that seals cracked wood permanently. The same compound that the furniture restoration industry charges $200 a job to apply. Hit subscribe so you do not miss it. And the video on screen right now shows another method the home and garden industry has been burying for decades. Click it.